Welcome to Miss Popcorn. Today, we're diving into one of the most jaw-dropping, unforgettable episodes in Grey's Anatomy history, the shooting episode. If you're a fan, you already know why this episode is legendary. There's so much drama, heartbreak, and edge-of-your-seat moments packed into one unforgettable storyline. In this video, we're breaking down 10 highlights that make this episode iconic. And yes, consider this your official spoiler alert. Number 10. Red means danger. Let's kick things off with the moments that set the tone for the entire episode. When Gary Clark shoots Reed. It's quick, it's brutal, and it instantly lets you know that this isn't just another day at Seattle Grace Hospital. But who is Gary Clark and why is he in a hospital with a gun? Earlier in the season, Gary Clark's wife, Allison, was taking off life support, a decision made by her doctors, Richard Weber, who operated on her, Derek Shepard, who pronounced her brain dead, and Lexi Gray, who pulled the plug. The authority that these doctors have to decide Allison's fate left Gary seething with grief and resentment. Now, he's back at the hospital with a gun, convinced that revenge is the justice he deserves. Reed is one of his first victims. When he calls her ma'am, she sharply corrects him, "I'm a surgeon."
"I'm not a tour guide, I'm a surgeon."
By this point, Gary Clark has been pacing through the hospital, repeatedly asking for Derek Shepard and getting nowhere. Her response only fuels his growing frustration, and yeah, he shoots her in the head. It's shocking, it's sudden, but the shock doesn't even end there. Alex, who hears the gunshot, confronts Gary and gets shot too. With so much blood spilling, this is the point where everyone, from the characters to us the audience, realize that lives are at stake and no one is safe. Number 9. The elevators are not working. Now, this is hands down one of the most unforgettable moments of the episode. Dr. Miranda Bailey, who is famously known for her commanding, no-nonsense, definitely intimidating demeanor, even earning her the nickname the Nazi, is suddenly stripped of all of that authority. Regular everyday Bailey is the one telling people to shut up, stop talking.
"It's Mr. Jones."
Is he dying?
"No."
Then stop talking to me.
And delivering lectures to both her subordinates and her superiors. So when Gary Clark asks Percy if he's a doctor and he says yes, only to be shot immediately, Bailey tearfully says she's a nurse. And in that moment, a chill runs down all our spines. Bailey cowering is not a comfortable sight at all. It's unsettling seeing someone who is always in control be so vulnerable. Things do not get any better because even after the shooter leaves without shooting her, Bailey still has to save Percy's life. She and the patient who was told to play dead drag Percy across the hall to the elevator in the hopes that once they get there, they can get him to an OR and save his life. They reach the elevators and we get the legendary "the elevators are not working" scene. This is where she loses it. It's heartbreaking to watch. It is also incredibly well acted to show the huge tragedy and horror this day was at the hospital. Number 8. When Yang's attitude could have cost her life. On a regular day, Christina Yang is not exactly known for her warmth or kind demeanor. Not even children are safe from her straight, matter-of-fact, no-nonsense approach. On a day when a shooter is on the loose in the hospital, taking out anyone who doesn't give him the answers he wants, the stakes could not be higher. So when Christina ends up alone with Gary Clark in an elevator and he asks her for directions, we are all holding our breath. Against all odds, she answers him calmly and helpfully, a far cry from her usual self. Why? Maybe it's because she's in a reflective mood after her emotional breakup with Owen. Whatever the reason, let's just say, thank you, Owen. Number 7. Meredith Grey's good news turns tragic. Let's talk about the roller coaster that Meredith Grey's day was in this episode. It starts off with such a rare moment of joy. She takes a pregnancy test and it's positive. She shares the news with Christina, but Derek, her husband, is having a packed day, so she plans to wait until later to tell him the big news. Happy day, yeah? But this is Grey's Anatomy, and happiness doesn't stick around for long. Just as Meredith is riding high on her secrets, she finds out that the hospital is on lockdown, there is a shooter, and worse, is hunting Derek, her husband. Meredith always saw the hospital as her home, her safe place. She grew up here, worked here, fell in love here, and even found out she was pregnant here. But in one horrifying day, all of that changed. A shooter invaded her sanctuary, shot her husband, and that led to her miscarriage. Talk about a complete 180 from the day she thought she was going to have. Number 6. April Kepner's award-winning monologues. April Kepner really brought it in this episode with not one, but two unforgettable monologues. First, she stumbles upon her best friend Reed's lifeless body in the most brutal way, sleeping on her blood, and April is in complete shock. She somehow makes her way to Derek's office all bloody red, struggling to process the trauma. In one of the rawest moments of the episode, April explains how much blood she was used to seeing on a normal scale, but the sheer amount of blood from someone as small as Reed completely throws her off. It's too much to process, and her vulnerability in this scene is both heartbreaking and gripping. Then we get another award-winning monologue after Derek is shot. With a gun pointed directly at her, she stumbles over her words and half cries through a desperate monologue. She talks about how young she is, how she has never known love or passion, and how she's just human, begging him to see her humanity and spare her life. This monologue is raw and tragic, and it shows how Grey's Anatomy can hit us with emotional depth even in the most unexpected ways. Number 5. Yang taking control. People are getting shot left and right. The hospital is on lockdown. Derek has been shot. Someone needs to operate on him. Teddy is not available. Neither is Owen. And in that very moment, Christina realizes she has to step up. She's not an attendant. She's just an extraordinary resident. She's the only one available. And she's as terrified as everyone else. But she does it afraid. She gives instruction to Meredith to sit down and promises to do her very best. And she's doing it until Gary Clark enters the OR. Now, Gary Clark has a gun to her head, asking her to stop saving Derek. Meredith is crying and screaming and begging her not to stop saving Derek. There's so much tension. It's one of those moments where Christina proves why she's the best. Her ability to compartmentalize and prioritize saving a life even when a gunman looms over her. It's tense, it's emotional, and it's Christina at her most iconic. Number 4. Love triangles and second chances. Carly and Arizona have been fighting about, well, God knows what this time. Oh, right, there are conflicting views on having children. But all of that arguing suddenly seems meaningless when they found themselves face to face with a shooter. After enjoying that sheer horror together, everything shifted. Carly told Arizona that she didn't mind giving up the idea of kids if it meant being with her. And Arizona, in turn, said she would have kids if it meant staying with Carly. That moment of shared fear and clarity was all it took for them to realize that they belong together and reconcile. And then there's Owen, who takes a bullet trying to protect Christina from the gunman, even though, let's not forget, they had just broken up earlier that day because of his unresolved feelings for Teddy. Talk about complicated. Meanwhile, Sloane and Lexi team up to save Alex. And honestly, the tension is palpable. Sloane is clearly in love with Lexi, but she's doing her best to avoid addressing the elephants in the room. Meanwhile, Alex, delirious and bleeding out, keeps calling Lexi by his ex-wife's Izzy's name. Another layer of awkwardness to the already messy situation. It's a shooting episode. People are dying. People are injured. No one is safe. Yet, somehow, Shonda Rhimes still manages to weave in the full-on tangle of love triangles. Classic Grey's Anatomy. Number 3. The uncelebrated heroism of Jackson Avery. A lot of well-deserved credit goes to Christina for saving Derek's life. But let's talk about some uncelebrated heroism. Jackson Avery. Honestly, he's a low-key MVP of this episode, and we can think of 3 standout moments where he's a hero. The first, pure nerve. Derek walks into the OR where Jackson is mid-surgery, pulls him aside, and calmly drops the bombshell that is a shooter in the hospital. Oh, and by the way, Jackson can't tell anyone, not until the surgery is complete. So Jackson has to keep suctioning, assisting, and acting like everything is fine, all the while being fully aware that a shooter is in the hospital. It's the kind of cool-headed composure that deserves way more recognition. The second moment of Jackson's quiet heroism comes when he realizes Owen and Teddy are not available to operate on Derek's gunshot wound. Without even missing a beat, he tells April to gather the staff and set up for Derek's procedure, knowing that Yang will have to do the surgery. It's a moment that highlights Jackson's natural leadership, keeping his cool and making decisive moves in a crisis without hesitation. The third moment seals Jackson's status as the unsung hero of this episode. In the middle of absolute chaos, Meredith offering herself to the gunman, Owen getting shot, and Christina starting to lose focus, Jackson's quick thinking becomes the difference between life and death. He realizes that the gunman is on the edge and will definitely shoot again. Jackson quickly unplugs the monitors, making it look like Derek has flatlined, and that illusion works. It convinces the shooter that Derek is already dead, and that de-escalates the situation just enough to save everybody in the OR. That level of intelligence and composure under pressure, that's not just heroism, it's a triple hero moment for Jackson Avery. Number 2. Richard Webber's logic. This might just be our favorite part of the episode because it's the brilliance of tying everything together. Webber knows exactly where to find Gary Clark, the hospital room where his wife died. When Gary informs him that he's there to shoot him and shoot himself, but he has only one bullet left, Webber doesn't run or beg. Instead, he tells Gary that he's lived it all: love, pain, success, failure, and is not afraid to die. This is a sharp contrast to April's earlier monologue when faced with a gun, where she pleaded for her life, talking about all the things she hadn't experienced yet. Talk about fine writing. Webber's words are not just about him, they're about Gary too. It's a calculated move, forcing Gary to confront his own emptiness and the futility of his revenge. By telling Gary that death isn't justice for him and he's not afraid to die, but that Gary shooting himself will be true justice, Webber strips away Gary's distorted sense of justice and revenge. It's a powerful moment of clarity. Also, the fact that Gary Clark couldn't bring more bullets because he needed space for his flask is a subtle but important detail. In the end, he only needed one bullet to shoot himself, and the flask, a symbol of his desperation and twisted courage, becomes the catalyst for him to finally face the reality of his actions. Thank you to Dr. Richard Webber for that one. Number 1. Gary Clark, the man of the hour. Gary Clark feels powerless. He believes the decision to take his wife off life support wasn't his to make, it was the doctor's choice. In his mind, he failed to protect her, and that failure has haunted him, leaving him feeling like he wasn't man enough at the time. Now, in his warped sense of justice, Gary believes that being a man means protecting his wife from people like Derek Shepherd, people who make decisions as if they are God. That's why he shoots everyone who tells him they are a surgeon. In his mind, they're the ones who took away his ability to protect her, and in his grief-stricken state, they're all complicit. Every doctor he encounters represents the system that failed him, and his desperation for control leads him to take violent action against those he believes hold the power over life and death. This episode brilliantly illustrates how grief can warp one's perception of reality and justice. It shows how overwhelming sorrow can cloud one's judgment, making it hard to distinguish what is right from what feels like the only way to restore a sense of control. Grief, in Gary's case, doesn't just hurt, it distorts his understanding of what's justifiable, and the audience can feel that emotion unraveling with him. So there you have it. Top 10 highlights of the shooting episode. Are you a fan of Grey's Anatomy? What's your favorite episode? What's your favorite highlight of this episode? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching Miss Popcorn. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more fun conversations about your favorite shows and movies. Until next time, keep the popcorn warm and see you soon.